Hello everyone, it's Danny Wills from Boxing Science and welcome to another episode of Boxing Science TV. This is episode 20 and it's all about fitness testing. Before we get into this episode, I'd like to kindly ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're going to be sharing some great content over the next coming weeks and we won't want you to miss out. Fitness testing is a big part of our program here at Boxing Science. Now the reason why is not only does it tell us the athlete's strengths, the areas for improvement, but also it helped us create some research and create some evidence to back our strength and conditioning and our conditioning programs. We needed to know what the physical capabilities of boxing are and what are the targets, what do they need to improve on. And this all came about back in 2014 when I did my master's dissertation. Myself and Alan Ruddock was my dissertation supervisor. We put together a physiological testing battery for boxing. Because before, there wasn't the data out there wasn't enough research out there. So when we was doing the strength and conditioning programs and doing some testing, we didn't have any data to compare that to. So we were comparing boxers with different kinds of athletes. For example, we're comparing a world champion boxer with a field hockey player. We know as strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists that field hockey players they're quite fit. You know, it's a quite physical, demanding sport. However, tell that to a world champion boxer going into their world title defence, then they're not going to really buy into that. They want to know how they compare with other boxers. So we decided to put together this testing battery. We tested 30 or so boxers on their strength, their speed, their movement, their high intensity fitness, and also their body composition. This provided us with a solid foundation of evidence and research that we still use today, not only to tell boxers how to improve, but also to help us improve our program as well. So in this episode, we're going to be sharing with you our testing methods that we've been using and tweaking and evolving over the past 5 years. We've been using this with youth athletes, we've been using it with England boxing, we've also been using it with high-level athletes and world champion boxers. So we're going to be taking you through the different tests that we use in the labs at Sheffield Hallam University, but also some adaptations that you could use in your facilities and in your coaching and training environments. This is going to be a quick overview, but if you want to find out even more about our testing, we share a lot through our Train Like a Champion program, but also through the Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshops. We have now got another date lined up in London on March the 9th and 10th. Here's a short promo video for you to have a watch before we get into our testing methods. Before we do any tests that require any physical exertion, we do a body composition assessment. We do this by using the InBody machine. The InBody machine is a great piece of kit that we have down here at Sheffield Hallam University, where it sends electrical currents through your body and analyses the amount of body fat that you've got, the amount of muscle mass that you've got. But not only that, where that's segmented around your body. So how much is in your arms, in your trunk, and in your lower body. When we did the first piece of research, we correlated the different tests that we're going to mention a little bit later on with punching performance. So estimated punch force with the medicine ball punch throw. And what we found was, from the in-body assessment, we found large correlations with trunk mass with medicine ball punch distance. So basically what we came to the assumption of the stronger and the more muscle mass that you've got in your trunk, this has a positive relation to your punching force. So this is really important when we're thinking about getting our athlete into the optimal shape when they're hitting the scales. If we're working with a featherweight boxer, they've got to make 9 stone. We don't want them to have the majority of their muscle mass in their legs or in their arms when we know that the biggest contributor to punching force is in their trunk. So we focus on a lot of core exercises to try and maintain that muscle mass around the trunk whilst you're making weight. But also, like, when you're making weight, we're wanting to make sure that we're reducing our body fat and maintaining our muscle mass as much as we can. And this is good from a starting point at start camp. Let's say if an athlete is struggling to make weight, it can give us a good indication of what weight category they can be in. So body composition test is a really valuable assessment that we use at Boxing Science. So the in-body machine is a great piece of kit. With it being great, it's also expensive. So we're very fortunate to have it down here at Sheffield Hallam University. You might not have access to the in-body kit, so how can you test your body composition? Well, for starters, the in-body kits are actually in most David Lloyd gyms. And also, like, if you go to your nearest health club, they'll be able to give you a body composition test. Now, this might cost a bit of money, but it can give you a good and valuable assessment. Also, hiring a qualified nutritionist, they should be able to assess your body fat using skin fold caliper assessment, and this can give you a good indication of your body fat and the amount of muscle mass that you have. So the first test that we do is a mobility assessment, and we use overhead squat. Now, there's many different ways that you can perform a movement assessment in strength conditioning. Often people use an FMS, but if you're limited on time to test your athletes, an overhead squat is the first go-to exercise that you'd use to assess movement, as it can give you a good indication of hip and shoulder mobility. And all that you need is a broomstick or light PVC stick. Hold it above your head and then try and squat as deep as you can, with keeping your back nice and straight and keeping your arms above your head. Now, what we've found with this test is that over 60% of boxers have tight shoulders. Now, this is a big kind of like warning sign, big red flag for anybody that's working with boxers and looking to try and improve their mobility, reduce the likelihood of injury, and also using appropriate exercises in the gym. For example, if you've got an athlete that can't do an overhead squat and bringing their arms too far forward, that'll limit their ability to do some overhead pressing. Not only affect their ability to lift and lift well, but also do it without like super compensating using the back muscles, arching back. This could end up with having injuries in the weight room. And as a strength conditioning coach, that's something that you don't want. You know, boxing is already a risky sport where injuries can happen. You know, the weight room is a controlled environment. We don't want to be getting any injuries there. A big part of our testing are our jump assessments. Now, what we found with our jump assessments is that these had a large correlation with medicine ball punch distance. So this suggests that the higher you can jump, the harder you can punch. Now, we use jump assessments because this is a good indication of lower body force production. So the amount of force that you can produce in your legs will transfer up through the body and through to the fist, and this is really beneficial for punching force. So we use jump height as a good indication of vertical impulse and lower body force production. And we do this using 2 tests. we use a squat jump test. We also use a counter movement jump test. So we'll start off with a counter movement jump test. This is a quick dip of the hips and knees, and you're going to jump up as high as you can. Whereas the squat jump test, you sit into squat jump position, you hold it, and then you jump up. So the difference between these two tests are that you use the elastic energy of the stretch shortening cycle during your counter movement jump test, whereas at the squat jump, you take that away and it's all about concentric force. Now, with this data, what we're able to do is see whether an athlete is able to use their stretch shortening cycle effectively. And what we've found with a lot of boxers is that the difference between squat jump and counter movement jump is very, very small. So you're supposed to jump higher during your counter movement jump than you are in your squat jump. And what we're finding is that the difference between the counter movement jump and the squat jump is quite small. So this is suggesting that boxers need to improve their eccentric utilization of their stretch shortening cycle. So we can target like getting stronger through like squatting. We can also help improve landing mechanics and help overload the eccentric portion of the stretch shortening cycle by using different jumping activities. The testing data for most boxers compared with average athletes, a lot of boxers aren't able to jump that high, as well as the difference between the squat jump and counter movement jump being quite low. And at Boxing Science, we've seen some big improvements in both counter movement jump height and squat jump height. We've seen differences of like 10, 15, maybe even up to 20%. But on average, our athletes are jumping 12 to 15% higher than they did when they first came onto the program. But not only the counter movement jump height and squat jump height have got better, the difference between the counter movement jump and squat jump have also got larger as well. So not only are they getting stronger and faster and more explosive, but they're also using that stretch shortening cycle more effectively. So we've mentioned it a few times already. We use the medicine ball punch throw as an assessment for punching force or punching speed. Now this is a test that that's been validated in other sports such as tennis, using it as a medicine ball shot put. Whereas we've tweaked that a little bit and made it into more punch specific action. So they'll get into an orthodox stance for throwing on the right hand, and they'll be twisting that hip and that torso and fire that medicine ball just like a punch. And then when they go into the left side, they switch into a southpaw stance, so we can see the differences between the rotational strength and the punching speed on the left hand side as well as the right hand side. So the only equipment that you need is a 3 kilo medicine ball, a tape measure and some tape to stick down the tape measure as well, and around about 15 meters in length, and obviously a high ceiling as well. If not, you're doing it outside. So the little facilities and little testing equipment that you need makes this test quite accessible and quite user-friendly and can be used in like any kind of gym. We use this test for quite a few years. However, we've tweaked and evolved the program due to like our improved knowledge and our experience, but also with the evolution of technology as well. And we've created the landmine punch throw test. So we perform the test using a 20 kilo Olympic bar, and we attach the tether of the GymAware to the end of the bar. We then throw the bar as fast as you can, 5 times on your right and left hand side, again switching stance from orthodox to southpaw, and we record the peak velocity in meters per second. So following the 10 repetitions on this test, we then go up in 5 kilos incremental loads, up to 40 kilos, which means like 20 kilos on the end of the bar. And what this does, we use the peak velocity from each load, and we're able to create a load velocity profile for the punch. So we're able to see who are the fast punchers, but maybe lacking that little bit of power, so they might need to improve their strength. Or we have the strong thudding punchers that are really good at high weight loads, but struggle to transfer that into lighter and faster loads. and they need to like kind of work on their speed. So it's a great way to then put in some punch-specific recommendations. So for example, for a faster puncher that's lacking that power, they maybe go on heavier landmine punches as their punch-specific training. However, stronger punchers that aren't able to transfer that speed, they probably go on lighter landmine punch throws or even medicine ball throws. So that's a great way that we assess punching force at Boxing Science. So the final part of this episode is talking about fitness testing, and it's probably the most important to you because boxing and combat sports are obviously physically demanding sports, and we want to try and be as fit as we can. At Boxing Science, we've used a range of fitness tests over the years, and this is based off like the different groups that we've worked with, the different facilities that we have. The bigger the group, the harder it is to implement the specific fitness tests. So we've had to adapt different kinds of fitness tests over the years. So we'll go off from the start where we use the Yo-Yo Intermittent Recovery Test Level 1. This is when I did my master's research, and the Yo-Yo test is a little bit like a bleep test. It's a 20-meter shuttle, and you've got to hit each side of the shuttle at the beep, and obviously the beeps get shorter and shorter as you go up through the levels. The difference between the Yo-Yo test and the bleep test is that you have that 10-second recovery in between. So it's testing your ability to work at high intensities and have that ability to recover in between sets. However, the problem that we found with this is that athletes struggled with the turning part. So, you know, the Yo-Yo test is really popular in like field sports, such as field hockey, football and basketball. However, they're used to like decelerating, turning and re-accelerating, whereas boxers haven't been coached that over the years. So when we got our athletes fitter and they're getting up to the higher speeds, they were failing the test, not based off fitness, but their ability to turn. So we decided to do a treadmill-based fitness test, which is a 30-15 intermittent recovery test. And this is adapted from Martin Buchet's field-based testing, and Dr. Alan Ruddock has created a treadmill version of this test. So it's a 30-15 test, 30 seconds of work, interspersed with a 15-second recovery. It starts at 8 kilometers per hour, and after each level, it goes at 0.5 kilometers per hour. And at the back end of the test, we're looking at speeds of 20 to 22 kilometers per hour. We see a lot of our top athletes get to 23.5, 24 kilometers per hour. And this is based off the main treadmill in the lab. On a normal fitness treadmill, we're seeing boxers like max out at 23 kilometers per hour. And the main thing that we record here is the heart rate to create a profile of how hard you're finding it on each level. And this can be compared with at the start of camp, towards the end of camp, and at different various points during the year. Because the difference between like top end speed might not be actually that big, that large, even though we're getting loads fitter, the impact on your top speed and your top score will actually be quite similar, or maybe just like 1 or 2 levels above. This isn't a good indication of how fit you are. It's all about your heart rate responses at different intensities. Other tests that we've used are the 1200 meter test, which we use at England Boxing, and we're able to give them specific maximal aerobic speeds, so MAS for short. This enabled us to set some target speeds for our conditioning program. And the last fitness test, but also probably the most effective test that we do, is a lactate profile. And this tells us a lot about the physiological responses to increased running speeds and running intensities. We do 3 minutes on and 1 minute off. And after each 3-minute interval, we'll take a blood lactate sample to give us an indication of the acidosis of the muscle. So basically, this is lactic acid. So we want to see how much lactic acid builds up at each interval. So the harder that you find it, the higher blood lactate scores that you'll record. And this creates a profile, and this determines whether you're a high intensity athlete or an endurance athlete. And what we found at Boxing Science is that most athletes walk into our labs as an endurance athlete. So basically, they'll find low intensities really easy, but as soon as they're challenged and reach that lactate threshold point, their lactates will go up quite steep, quite sharp, and they're unable to continue with the test. So what we've found after years of high intensity conditioning, that athletes actually transform into high intensity athletes and improve their ability to work at high intensities. Their lactate stays quite low, but once they reach that threshold point, they're actually able to still control that lactate, and we actually shift their curve to the right, so they're finding low intensities easier, but also they're able to cope and able to work at higher intensities as well. So that's been a quick overview of our testing methods at Boxing Science. Hopefully you found it useful. Obviously there's loads more information that we can share with you, such as standardized scores, the techniques of the testing methods as well. And this is all available to you through our Train Like a Champion Remastered program, and also on our Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshop. So like I mentioned before, we now have a date set for our next Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshop. This is taking place in London on the 9th and 10th of March. The link is in the description box below. Take a look at that for more information. But here's another quick insight to what's delivered on the workshop. So thanks everybody for watching. If you haven't done already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we've got plenty more coming up on Boxing Science TV.
Part of the weekend for me was kind of seeing how all the different aspects of Boxing Science fit together in order to make a complete athlete.
Both coaches here were very open to questions. They gave explanations for everything. They had scientific reasoning and evidence and explanations for everything.
I wasn't flooded with the information, and then when it comes to the practical session, they were great, hands-on. You could get in, do whatever you wanted to do.
I couldn't recommend it highly enough. I'd definitely jump on the opportunity. It's a steal at the price point that it's at.
100% worth it. All right, the money was worth it, the knowledge was worth it, and the things you can take of yourself into the real world, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've come in today and I've been pretty blown away by the level of content that's being delivered. Yeah, the fact that it's coming from such a strong evidence base and it's been so thoughtfully put together. I'd really recommend the content.
If you want to get somewhere and you want to learn, I think this is the best place to be.